There we go. So that'll be sent to you following the session. So welcome to today's session. It's really nice to see you all. Nice to see some familiar faces as well. So my name's Kerry Clarkson. I'm one of the trainers here at 9 Dots Development, and it's a pleasure to host today's session on how to generate buy-in for your training programs. So here at 9 Dots, we support individuals, teams, organisations in growing and improving knowledge, skills, behaviours, both in the current environment now, but in the future, what future needs that we might potentially need. And we do this through our range of extensive training programs, professional apprenticeships, but also our free content series, which is Developing Yourself and Others, which is this is part of what you're on today. And what we do every 2 weeks, we look at a real life situation or problem that people have given us feedback on that we could do with a bit of help with. And we look at these problems, look at the root causes that people are struggling with their teams and their individuals, and look at expert tips, free articles, podcasts, videos, webinars like today, and looking at how we can help and support each other. Okay, so what we're looking at today is looking at how we can ensure that training appeals to different audiences, how people can use something called the 70-20-10 model that you might have heard of, how we can diversify the way people learn, and overcome any challenges that could potentially prevent that learning from taking place. Okay, so as I said, lots of useful material on that, the handout as well. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is the handout, and it's got loads of bonus information. So everything we cover today on the slides is in here, and also at the back you've got all these different articles and reading recommendations as well. So really useful stuff in there. So however you prefer to learn, you can either listen to me today, you can go through the handout, or you can look at the slides. Okay, so let's crack on then. So the interactive session then, so again, another point that we'll look at today is all these different types of learning. So one of them is through interactive learning on webinars, which is something a lot of businesses are now doing. I think we were getting there anyway, but I think the pandemic speeded everybody up, that location was no longer an issue when training wanted to take place, because anybody can do it from anywhere as long as they've got a good internet connection and a laptop or a phone or iPad. Okay, so these kind of interactive virtual sessions, we're all in one classroom. So we ask you to be on mute unless you're saying something, because we are either at home or in the offices or sometimes on a bus or a train. So what I'll ask you to do is pop yourself on mute and then take yourself off mute when you want to say something or answer a question or ask a question. And as I said, you've got the chat box as well, which is like an instant messaging. You can make your own notes on your handout. We'll send you useful resources and articles. I've got a whiteboard, which is one of the good things about these kind of WebExes. It's like having a flip chart in the room. And it usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour with these kind of sessions today. As I said, you've got that handout there, so download that as we go. And then the objectives then for today's webinar. So we're going to be looking at how we can run a training session that appeals to everybody. Everyone is different. Everyone takes information on board in a different way. So how we can appeal to all audiences. Understanding the 70-20-10 model and the importance of training to the organisation, to the individual having the training, to the team, to the manager, and how it affects us. And then think about how we can overcome those potential constraints and barriers that get in the way of that training being successful. Okay, so let's start then. I'll put a question to you, is why is training important then? Why don't we just give somebody a set of objectives and say, there you go, I know you've got the skills to do it, just get on and do it. So why do we have training? And you can look at this in 3 different ways. You could look at it, why do we have it for the individual? What's the benefit to the individual? What's the benefit to the team? And what's the benefit to the organisation? Okay, so if we start with the individual then, why what's the benefit of training to the individual? Oh yeah. Hi, Chloe.
Oh, yeah. So, well, I think we just, as much as everybody has their own personal experiences and knowledge and skills, I just don't, we don't all like necessarily have the relevant skills to carry out certain parts of our roles. So I think it's always useful to learn more skills in anything we're doing as individuals. And yeah, I think we've all always got something to learn.
Absolutely, you're spot on. And you sometimes we go into a role and think that we do know everything about it, or our manager might think that we know everything about it, but what's really good is that we can actually still learn. We can keep up to date. Things change, don't they, in the world, as we've seen in the last 2 years. And it's really important that we, as Stephen Covey said, he keeps sharpening that saw, making sure that we are at the top of our game in the knowledge, skills, and behaviours side of things. Absolutely. Let's look on the chat as well. So Paula, helps with confidence and to make sure we're all doing the things in a uniformed way. Yeah, it's that consistency. It's really important, isn't it? And giving that direction. Again, it can damage confidence if we're assuming people know what they're doing. And then that person might be thinking, well, I can't tell them that I don't know what I'm doing because they think I know what I'm doing, and then I might lose my job. So it's that snowball effect. So yeah, for an individual, that confidence is huge, and making sure that we as managers and leaders make sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and behaviours required to fulfil that job. And then they are more likely to be self-fulfilled, greater productivity, greater engagement as well. And that self-esteem and personal growth and leading from the front in their team, giving them this self-worth, knowing that they know everything they possibly can know about that role. And it's like that career progression as well. Fantastic. Okay, so what about the team then? What's the benefit of training to the team itself? It can be an individual being trained, but what is the benefit of that to the team? If have any of you been in a team where you think you're carrying somebody maybe? And Chloe, yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
I like these icons. They're really cool, aren't they? Putting your hand up. I love it. Thank you.
I think it serves lots of purposes. I think it can be really good for the team because it can be something that you do together, kind of outside of your normal role. So it can kind of be like a team building thing. But then also, yeah, I think what you just said about there's quite often you get feelings in teams that somebody's like pulling their weight more or less than other people and those kind of things. And training can, well, obviously it can like skill people up so that they're able to carry out their roles better. But I mean, in certain types of training, it can also provide a space for people to kind of be able to maybe address like issues within the team without it having to be like a personal conflict or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it might be that say if you're in the team and your manager isn't actually addressing that issue, it can cause a bit of conflict within the team as well, you and the person, but also you and the managers in like, well, why aren't they doing something about it? Why am I working really hard and that person isn't doing what they need to do in their role? So it's filling any of those crucial gaps within the team, maybe behavioury, if there's such a word, but also technically as well. Are they able to do the job? So it's that conduct and capability side of things, that team morale, but also to build on those strengths. So what I've done before in the past is done a SWOT analysis as a team exercise. So the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So as a team, we can actually say, right, what are you really good at? What can I learn from you? What is my weakness but your strength? And if you know about Belbin's team roles, that's a really good way of saying, right, what does that person bring to the role? What does that person bring? And we're not going to say that we're all going to be brilliant at everything, but it's actually really nice to know what your skill is, so you can actually build on that even more, and other people can learn from you as well. Absolutely. And yes, and it can support team building. Absolutely, being able to that codependency, relying on each other, and respect for each other, knowing what they bring to the team. And Paula all will know what to do, and the team members can help each other during high demand. Yeah, absolutely. It's not having that one point of failure. Everyone knows what other people do, and also there's that respect. Then they know what you can do and what you bring to the team. And then the organisation. Then, why is it important to your organisation that people are trained? What could happen if we don't train them? Absolutely, and yeah, it can upskill the organisation and support change. Yeah, so especially if there's a big change happening, we will need to train them on that change. There might be a new system being brought in. We can't just expect people to read a book and say, well, this is how you press the button and that's it. Some people, as we'll look at in a moment, will learn by doing. Some people will learn by reading, listening. So there's different ways. But yeah, upskilling people, really important. And for the organisation to lead from the front then. Absolutely, Paul. Engagement is a huge thing. If people aren't feeling they're being developed, they will look elsewhere for that development. So then it links into staff retention, staff turnover, cost. Not only of recruitment, but also while we haven't got the staff in place, how much productivity or customers are we missing out on as well? So engagement is huge. And I love that as well, Paul's staff well-being. Absolutely. The stress of not knowing or being confident in what you're doing, but also doing 3 people's jobs because we haven't got enough people to do those jobs. So yeah, it's huge. Method to ensure the organisation is meeting quality standards. Absolutely. Fantastic. So you've got compliance in there as well. You've got the succession planning, customer satisfaction, productivity, engagement, all those kind of things. Okay. So we can see why training is so important. So we know why we need to do it, but why is the buy-in to that training as important? So it's all well and good us saying, right, here's some training you need to have. We're asking them what they need training, but why is it so important as they have the buy-in as well? What could happen if they don't have that buy-in? Absolutely, yeah. They are more likely to take that learning on board. Otherwise, we might be talking to a brick wall, aren't we? They might, and it's that mindset as well. If they know the training they're coming to is actually going to be applicable to them, going to make a difference, they're much more likely to listen. And absolutely, Paul, they disconnect, don't they? I've been on training courses where some people haven't even took their coats off, or they haven't come with any pen or paper because they don't even know why they're there. Or they might know why they're there, but they haven't actually had the, the whiffing, what's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? Because in their mind, they're thinking, oh, I really need to be at a meeting. I don't need to be here. So the pre and post course kind of meetings are really important. But the why, so that first port of call is identifying those training needs, and understanding what the impact could be if we don't have that buy-in. If we would lose out on engagement, but time, cost, all those kind of things. If we'll look at different types of training in a moment, but if we just send someone on a training course for the day and that they're not bought in, we've lost the time, it's cost money, and we've lost engagement as well. And we've looked at these on different webinars, but there's different ways to identify that need, such as a training needs analysis, a SWOT analysis, 360 reviews, the gap analysis on knowledge, skills, behaviours, personal development plans. The 360 reports are really good because it's that asking what a manager, a peer and a direct report, what they think, and give you feedback. But it's about learning, what does that person need? So, and what do they think they need, which is really important. So we need them to know that it's a meaningful session, but also making sure that if you heard of VARC, which is like the visual learning, the auditory, the reading, the kinesthetic. So what ways do they take that learning on board? And we'll look at Honey Mumford in a moment about the type of the way people take information on board. And also there's lots of different personality models out there as well. Again, different people take information and learn in different ways. It's taking all that on board rather than saying, right, off you go onto a training course, or here you go, here's a book. And by the time you finish that book, I know you'll have learnt everything. I don't know about you, but if I ask somebody for directions, if I stop and pull over and say, if you can tell me where this is, they could talk to me and I'll be nodding my head going, and while they're saying left, right to the end of this road, left, right, yeah. And then I'll go, no idea what they've just said, because I don't take information in here. I have to see it. If they wrote it down, I'd be able to do it. But then again, with my navigation skills, I'm not so sure, but I need it written down. And that's why we do learn in different ways. We have the slides for visual, we have the handouts for reading, we have the audio so you can listen to this back, and we do in our sessions, we have breakout sessions so you can have that kinesthetic of writing on a whiteboard. So you have all these different ways of learning. It's really important you mixed it up, that you don't just kind of put your preference onto the audience itself that you're training. Okay, so it's the buy into the training, what's in it for them, is it as important as why training needs to happen. Okay, so we've got this idea then of the training needs to happen, and we know that people need to have this buy-in, but we still have these barriers. Sometimes it still doesn't happen. What's your biggest reason, do you think, why training doesn't happen even when we've sold it to the person and we know training needs to happen? Sometimes it still doesn't. What's that reason for you, do you think? I know I've been due to go on training courses in previous roles, and they pull it on the morning I was about to go. So workload, yeah, absolutely. I don't know why, but learning development always seems to be at the bottom of the list of things. It's like the first thing to go if there's an issue, or cost wise or time wise. It's like, well, we'll pull that training and do it another time. And yet the training is usually the thing that will solve that problem of the time issue, because we're giving knowledge, skills and behaviours that will help. And ironically, it's sometimes pushed to the back of the queue because of that workload. And Paul, yeah, because they haven't been helped to understand what the benefit is to them. Yeah, sometimes it's just like, you will go on this course. Whereas actually, what is the outcome? And that's where objectives comes in, and the pre-course conversation is, so this is what you'll be covering. What does that mean to you? What will that mean when you've finished this training? How will it affect you? What will the impact be? That's really good. And Jane, people's general lives get in the way sometimes, illness and other commitments. Absolutely, especially at the moment. You know, if you've got COVID, it's the restrictions of that. I know there's no laws now, but I think probably people don't tend to come into work if they've got COVID. But I think the virtual side has helped with that kind of thing. But then also if the children are off school and you've got them running around while you're trying to have a training session, that can get in the way, can't it, as well? So yeah, there's so much that goes on in people's lives that we don't see. So you've got the there's a lot of resource implications side of it. So we've talked about like the cost and the time, the personal side, like Jane said, and the availability, trying to get everybody in one, not necessarily one location, but one time slot that everyone who needs that training is available. That's a real a real challenge sometimes. And it's looking at the balancing out of the training needs as well. So it might be some qualifications need to be done, even though they're expensive, they need to be done in order to be able to function in the organisation. Whereas what we need to look at is, are there any cheaper alternatives that can overcome that that issue of the cost? And it's also looking at that engagement of other people. Why do some people get access to qualifications and some people don't? So making sure that learning development is fair and that accessibility is fair to everybody. It might not necessarily that you need, for example, a legal or finance qualification for your role, but it was again coming back to that engagement and retention. What else might they actually want a qualification in? Okay. And that's one thing, again, what we do, it isn't, we can overcome that cost by looking at apprenticeships. It's 95% funded. So there's lots of different areas that you can actually use for learning development that you can overcome, because with apprenticeships, it's actually while you're at work. It's not like about going to college. It's not the old style apprenticeships. You're actually in the job while you're doing it. So it's a really good solution. And you've got the free webinars like this as well. So there's always something you can overcome these barriers. It's just really sitting down and thinking, right, what are the other alternatives? And what we're going to look at are those things about the learning styles, the availability, the access, the timing, and also the support of the line manager and the organisation. Looking at whether learning, and we've looked at this on a previous webinar, is there a learning culture within the organisation? Does the organisation encourage you to have personal development time? Do you have a personal development plan? A CPD, continual professional development? Does your manager have it? If your manager has it, then you're more likely to have it because you'll be encouraged to do it. So PDP is another webinar that we've done, which is really important. Again, if you're on top of your development needs, you're more likely to have that buy-in because it's your PDP. Okay. Do many people have a personal development plan, just out of curiosity? Yes, yeah. That's good. Oh, that's good. Oh, see, oh, okay. See, I was getting excited then. I was thinking we're going to have a full house. Oh, well, you know, Chloe and Paul, there's a webinar on PDPs that I can help you with that. I can take you through all the steps. But again, it's a really good way of looking at, again, you can do that SWOT analysis. What areas do you want to work on? And again, things like where it's written down, it's more likely to happen, those goals. Okay. So there's two different ways normally that we look at these constraints. Sometimes it's in from a resource point of view, and sometimes it's from a learner's point of view. Okay. So sometimes in business, what we're going to look at is it within the budget? So is there a learning development training budget? Okay. Who's going to cover the person, and how much will that cost if that person isn't in the job while they're out of the office doing the training? What's the return on investment of that training? So it's almost like you're building a business case. When if you were the manager or HR wanting to do training, you almost have to kind of all these areas are covered, so you're taking away those barriers. So time as well then is always one of the ones that pops up. So how long is the training? Is it an hour every week for a year? Is it a day? Is it a residential weeks course? Who's paying for that? Okay. So the length and the timing. What are the other priorities going on at the same time? So what are the chances of it being pulled last minute? The availability of the person who you want to be trained, but also the person who is covering that person. How many people are off at the same time? So is training in July and August a good idea when there might be people on holiday, because it's a 6 weeks holiday and it's summer? So looking at when that timing happens and the availability. And the location as well. So do people need to travel? Do we need to pay for the hotel and petrol? Or can we make it virtual like this and people can do it from home? Will that encourage engagement, or will that decrease engagement? So lots of different things in a business point of view that we need to think of. So this is where we'd be going to someone to say, right, this is all these 4 areas are covered to get their buy-in. Okay. And then the other side is the learner then. So we need to make sure the actual role. So does the learner need this training because something's changed, or is the role growing? Do we need to have new business needs met as well? So making sure it's the right thing for the person. So their knowledge, skills and behaviours. The motivation, so how we sell it to them. Do they want to develop? What is their intrinsic motivation? So when I talk about the intrinsic, extrinsic, it's the extrinsic is almost like do this and we'll get some pizza in. Hit this week's target and we'll do this. That's extrinsic. We haven't found out what actually motivates them. The intrinsic is what drives that person, what gets them out of bed, that personal development. What is it inside? And that's different for everybody, and we need to find that out. So the accessibility. So do we need to make any adjustments? Can we flex and adapt to make sure everyone has the access to this learning? And what we're coming on to in a moment is that learning style. So is there a mixture in the group of activists, theorists, reflectors and pragmatists? How can we appeal to all of them? Do we want to appeal to that person's style, or do we want to stretch people? So there's lots of things that we need to think about how we can actually get that learner on board as well as the business. Okay. So I mentioned Honey Mumford a few times in the learning styles. People familiar with this? Are you familiar with this in the learning styles? It's fascinating because there's so many things out there when you look at personality styles, but when you look at these 4, you tend to see yourself in one and maybe 2 of them, and they are fascinating. I mean the activist styles, and they learn by doing. They are happy to jump in, and it's really important that yes, we bend to preferred learning styles with different development methods supporting that, but also thinking about how we can encourage experimentation and stretch as well. So as I said, with the activists, then they're happy to jump in and just do it. They enjoy the challenges. Often sometimes that comes with they often think act before they think, because they just want to get on and do it. So they like things like competitions and role play and puzzles and brainstorming. So they don't particularly like the reading and the theory and the analysing side of it. So if you were, for example, a theorist, you might think it was a really good idea to set everyone to have a book club and say, right, I want everyone to read a chapter of this. But if you said that to an activist, they'd be thinking, oh my word, why can't I role play it instead? So it's about thinking how you can attract that person to come and embrace that learning. Okay. The reflectors then, what do you think they like to do? Apart from reflect. You don't get any points for that one. Jane, yeah, they like to think and they like to observe. And Chloe, listen, yeah, absolutely. So they'll probably be watching the activist thinking, right, well, I'll let them do it first. I'll observe them from the sidelines and then reflect on it and think about it. So they'll take the information on board, but they won't like to be rushed to make that decision. They want to be prepared. So if a role play was one of the activities, you'd say, right, we're going to have 15 minutes preparation time. And also, I'll do the role play first so you can see how it's done. And then I'll give you time to prepare. So you're then matching their learning style as well. They'll have time to compose themselves, but also they've looked at how it's done. Whereas an activist won't want to do that. They'll just want to get on and do it. So they would like feedback from others. They like coaching, watching interviews, or paired discussions as well. Absolutely, Jane. Yeah, you can be a mixture of any of them. And we have got all four of them in us. It's just in different quantities. And there's lots of questionnaires out there which are really interesting to do. So yeah, I'm a funny example of this is I'm an activist, but also a reflector, depending on the situation. So I like to get my hands dirty and do stuff, but I want to make sure I'm doing it right. So I'll just watch somebody else first. So yeah. The theorist then, again, if we were like today, if I was just talking about training in general, a theorist might be going, well, that's well and good, but what's the theory behind it? So this is why in the handout there's lots of information, because theorists will like to go and learn about it. So things about the fact that this is Honey and Mumford, the fact that we'll come on to a theory of 70-20-10 in a moment. So it's the theory behind what we're talking about. So what are the models, the facts behind it? Where's it come from? Whose ideas was? What's the statistics? What's the stories behind it? And then the pragmatist is, well, this is all well and good, but what about me in my job and the real world? It's all well and good, Kerry, you're telling us about this, but how's it going to affect me? So they won't be interested in it unless they can see that it's applicable to them. So this is where that what's in it for me, what is going to be the impact when I get back to the office or back on site with the team, how's it going to help me? So where the theory is too heavy, they won't be that interested because it's about the real world. But they like trying new things like problem solving, case studies, and that discussion about, yeah, great, but how is it going to work for me? Okay, so let's test your understanding then. So who would like to read books then out of those four? And again, it could be a mixture of them. Yeah, a theorist likes to read books, absolutely. They want to know where it's come from. What are you talking about, Kerry? Or is it just something that I've just made up, or I've actually read that somewhere? What about a role play? Oh yeah. I mean, even before, when I've done training, and I can say this because I'm an activist as well, before you even finish instructions, they've started. And before, like flip charts, they've got the pen up there ready writing. I haven't even said what I've asked them to write yet. They're in there. But we need an activist. We need an activist to kind of kick it off and start it off. Who likes to do a bit of research then? Yeah, theorist, Kate. Yeah, Jane. Yeah, yeah. A theorist, we're just going to go and do a bit. Let me just read a bit more about that. Could be a reflector as well. Could be all of them. You know, it doesn't mean just because a theorist or a reflector doesn't like role plays, they don't do it. It's just that they need to know a bit more information about it first. Demonstrations then. Yeah, absolutely. The reflector will like to see how it's done, but also the activist and the pragmatist as well, to a certain point, will see, okay, well, you've told me the theory, but let's see it in real life then. And the case studies. Do you remember who I said likes a case study? Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, yeah, it's in the real world. How will it apply in the real world? And then who likes a good game? Absolutely, yeah. And the pragmatist, the reflector, and the theorist will all be sitting there going, "Why are we doing this?" So yeah, spot on. Well done, Grace. Okay, then. So this buy-in to these learning activities, then. So we've got we know what the gaps are. We know what their learning preferences. So what we need to think about now is the actual activities we can use to close those gaps. And the theory behind this is the 70-20-10 learning model of learning and development. Has anybody heard of that before? It's really fascinating because it's how the world is changing. It's about especially with apprenticeships now, it's a lot about on-the-job learning. So on-the-job learning now actually looks at 70% of learning that takes place. Okay, so actually things like while you're in the job, so it's things like you're learning through doing, challenges that you might have in the job as well, the experiences that you have, and then the personal reflection. You're learning by doing and reflecting on that action. You're getting feedback, you're reading, your stretch assignments, shadowing, solving problems, special projects, TED Talks, podcasts, all these different things while you're actually on the job. That is the biggest part now, is 70% is on the job learning. Oh, that's not very clear. Let me just change the colour. Because there, all those kind of things that we've talked about, time, cost, all those different things, while actually doing the learning on the job, it takes those issues away. Because you're actually learning off somebody else, you're shadowing somebody else. So I'm just going to change that. So text 70% is on the job. Okay. Social learning then is 20%. So the social side of learning is all about the collaboration, the working with others, buddying up with someone on a project, team building activities of working together with somebody, mentoring someone, coaching, being a member of the community, conferences, action learning sets, social media communities, all that kind of thing is classed as social learning, which is again a huge part of learning now. And then lastly, but not least, is the formal, which is now only 10% of learning. And this is, as you can imagine, the formal learning is the directed structured learning, like qualifications, in-house programs, seminars, e-learning kind of things. So what you might have heard of something called blended learning, and it's making sure that it's kind of made up from these, that, and this is like an apprenticeship. You have the formal learning, you then have action learning sets and discuss with other people, and then you actually put the learning into practice in the job. You actually embed. So this is again like the knowledge, skills and behaviours. You actually try things out. You have a team meeting, you do a presentation, you try it out in the job. Okay. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with those kind of percentages? That that's how learning now takes place, rather than everyone just going on a course? Yeah. I remember when I first joined the bank years and years ago, it was like a 4-week residential course. And you don't hear of those anymore, do you? It's basically right. off you go. You're going to be shadowing this person for a week. So things have changed, definitely. Yeah, it did, didn't it, Paula? Yeah, lockdown, absolutely. Yeah, it will, and yeah, absolutely. Different sectors will change this model. Yeah, absolutely. But it's worth keeping this in mind when you're thinking about the activities as well with the learning styles. So when you're looking at a personal development plan, you're making sure that your learning style and this model are both taken care of. Okay, so even if it's on the job, it's making sure that while they're in the job, some a reflector or a theorist can still read a book. It's not all about doing. Okay. And also to stretch the other learning styles as well, that they do something different. They don't just do everything that suits them, because that's how we grow and develop ourselves. So what I'm going to ask you now is share with me, what does your organisation do well in regards to training, learning, development, and what best practices can you share with each other, both in like the 70-20-10 model? How do you do it in your organisation? What do you do to make it work? How do you get people engaged and brought into training? Yeah, Chloe. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things, well, I've only just quite recently kind of become responsible for the training in our organisation, but I think like one of the things I'm trying to do is ask everybody what training they think they need and what would be interesting to them for their roles, but also just sort of personal development. And I'm finding that really useful, just in terms of like planning the training for the year, but also I do feel like people are getting engaged in their training because of that. I do think it helps. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's their training, isn't it? It's their PDP. It's I bet you, by you asking them, they're halfway there to being brought in. A lot of the problems happen with training is when somebody's told you are going on this course because it's been booked, not actually what do you need, where are your areas. So this is where your SWOT analysis is coming comes in, where you can actually do the training needs analysis on the knowledge, skills and behaviours of what does the job entail now, what's the future, how can we move you from here to here, or the training needs analysis that you've got. Yeah, training needs analysis is really important, where again it's how it's communicated. I think with the training needs analysis is that, say if you have a set of knowledge, skills and behaviours that are required for that role, and you can score yourself 1 to 5. Where the training needs to happen is where people aren't at the level required, but people might think, well, if I put that I'm a 2 or a 3, I might lose my job. And the idea is actually, you know what, this doesn't go anywhere. It's nothing to do with performance. This is about how I can help you with your training. So if everyone just puts a 5 because they're scared of losing their job, it's not going to work. They're going to say, I can do everything. But it's how it's communicated that is the key, that you are safe. It's not going anywhere. It's not in regards to performance. It's in regards to training and development. Okay. And you work for Citizens Advice. Training is a huge part of our culture for staff and volunteers. Good mix on theory. Oh, that's brilliant to hear. Fantastic. That's lovely. And that mix is so important, isn't it? And the fact that it's part of the culture. With culture, it has to come from up here and filter down and cascade through that. We support development as opposed to seeing it as a luxury. Definitely. Anyone else want to share what your organisation does well, or any best practices? What about yourselves? What do you do to take care of your learning? Because I think sometimes if you're responsible for training and learning development, You're so busy looking after everybody else, you might be forgetting about yourself as well. But what I'm pleased to see is that you're on here. This is part of learning development. That's good. Fab, Kate. Great webinars, brilliant. And every day I learn something new. Brilliant, Paul. And that's it. It's having that open mind, isn't it? Sign up for a few organisations and I'm on their mailing list. Great, yeah. Fantastic. And that's really good. That's so good and refreshing to see. It is. It's about. I mentioned Stephen Covey before about the 7 habits. I know it's an older theory, but it's still so relevant with the sharpening of the saw. You keep yourself at the top of your game. Things change so much so quickly. If we stand still, we're actually going to be behind. Okay. Absolutely, Kate. Absolutely, we have to lead from the front. Definitely. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, great. Okay. So what are you going to do then going forward? What's your plan after this webinar then? How are you going to take what you've learned from today? How can you encourage others to sign up for webinars or mailing lists? Yeah, Paul, great. Fabulous. Really important. Yes, I will. Yeah, mindful of the 70-20-10. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Jane. Yeah. It's getting that message across, isn't it? That it's not the first thing to go. This is really important to make sure that we are ahead of the next whatever's happening in the world by going on webinars and having main lists. You know what's going on. I have my inbox is full of different training things that what's the next big thing. We want to be there, don't we? We don't want to be catching up. We want to be at that front. And Chloe, yeah, training needs analysis, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good, it is a good team activity as well. It brings everyone a bit closer. And I think it makes everyone a bit more tolerant as well. It's like, oh, that's why. That's why you do that. And it helps people understand each other more. Fantastic. That's really good, guys. Thanks for sharing. Brilliant. Have you got any questions and comments before I ask you to do our little poll? We have a lot of training coming up for our staff on client portal. It'll be the same format for everyone videos. I wonder what the best way to get all to buy. I think the technology, I think, is the biggest thing, Paula. Sometimes it puts people off. So making sure there's a test for it first to make sure it works. So maybe do make sure everyone is comfortable with the technology side of it. Because sometimes it doesn't work and then they don't want to do it again. So practicing that. Also having a pre-meeting before it with their manager. So should have like joining instructions so of what's coming up on that training, the objectives. So if the manager looks at those objectives and say, right, what is it you want to get out of it, out of this session? What do you want to be able to do at the end of the session? And then you revisit that with a post-course meeting about, right, okay, so how are we going to put this into practice then? What does it mean for you? Okay, so then it's not a sheep dipping exercise. It's a what can I get? What can you get out of it? How can you bring it back to the team as well? So if it's say one person from each team, what is a really good way is that they do a presentation when they get back, and everyone else can learn from that person as well. Pleasure. Any other questions that we can help with? That's pleasure. Pleasure. What I'll do is I've just sent you some links in the in the chat box there. So the first link there is the handout if you haven't had a chance to download that yet. And also there's the free content series there, the second link, the 95% funded training and also private training that we do. But if I can ask you to fill out some questions on the poll, that would really help us out, please. So it just takes a couple of, probably not even a minute. It's just to give us some more ideas of for our future webinars as well. And in the handout there with the link, you get like articles and links to books, and you also get a free consultation opportunity, and the recording of this session, as I said, will be sent out following the session as well. You'll also get an email asking you for your feedback on the session as well, which will really help us in the future. And as I said, I've sent that in your chat box about what we do here at 9 Dots. But as I said, there's lots of different webinars coming up. So we've got on the 19th of May, we've got how to access the 95% funded training to upskill your workforce. And then on the 26th of May, we've got encouraging proactivity through delegation. Okay. But if you go on the Join the Dots link there as well, it has lots and lots of different titles on there that you might find useful that you can sign up to as well. But yeah, if you tell other people about it as well, if you're on LinkedIn, you could share it on there as well, which would be really good. We'll be really grateful. But it's just really nice to be able to share ideas and network with other people as well. It's been a strange 2 years, hasn't it? So it's nice to see so many lovely faces in one place. So hopefully we can start getting back into offices and seeing you face to face soon as well. But this is fantastic as well in the meantime. Any questions at all? But before there's 3 minutes left on the poll, so you can still do that for us. That'd be great. But any questions in the meantime? Thanks, Anne. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. It's nice when people talk to me because I know somebody's there then. It's nice to see faces as well. Brilliant. Thanks. Great. So we've got 2 minutes left on the poll, but if there's anything else, just give me a shout. But I'll stay on until you've all left, so I know that nobody's waiting to ask a question. Oh, thanks, Kate. Bless you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Yes, Olivia. Yeah, if you go online, if you just put it on Google, and you can put in, so there's so many different ones. There's disc profiles, DISC. There's Myers-Briggs as well, MYERSBRIGGS, Myers-Briggs questionnaires. There's Insight, Discovery Insight questionnaires as well. But yeah, there's loads. But if you just go on, some of them you'd have to pay for, and some of them will be free. But to just be able to, the free ones will be enough for what, if you just want to find that out. But the paid for ones are usually probably about £40 each, but they give you a report. But yeah, we use DISC in our training, DIS. I always want to sing DISCO, but DISC. And that looks at dominance, influence, steadiness, and cautiousness. And again, that looks at kind of the extroversion, introversion, people focused versus task focused. Really interesting stuff. But even if you just go on Disc on Google, the website is free and that gives loads of information on there. Pleasure. Thank you. Right, thanks. Right, there's just 13 seconds left on the poll. Fab. Great. Lovely. Okay then, guys, thanks ever so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care of yourselves. Have a lovely afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.